When you first discover a spiritual path, like a proper spiritual path, not the hodgepodge of spiritual ideas that seem to accumulate through a person's world experience, a little bit over here and a little bit over there, and this all sounds much the same. Not really like that, but when you first discover something like A Course in Miracles, where you've got a concerted effort and a dedicated layout of a disciplinary application of spiritual principles that you can put to work in your life, it often comes as a bit of a shock, or perhaps a lot of a shock, how far out of kilter your way of thinking is compared to, let's say, the thought system of a healed mind or an awakened mind. And that, of course, is a mind that sees through the eyes of unconditional love, regardless of what's going on, and only replicates in action the expression of giving, which is the activity of God. God only gives. So when you first pick up a book like A Course in Miracles, which clearly outlines the true nature of the association you have with life on the planet, and you start reading through through the text, you suddenly realize how far out of whack you've become, or you are, with regards to how you see compared to how an awakened mind sees. And of course, then you set about the process of truing up or correcting the vision that you have regarding life and the expression that you offer as a participant in life, becoming more and more akin to your true self as you go along. And eventually, of course, you reach the point where things like texts and lessons and things like that are no longer helpful to you. You've transcended them, gone beyond them. And not that you will ever on earth not need those principles at play, because every day is going to bring an opportunity to see something differently, and an opportunity to go beyond. And one of the things that I love in the Course is that it says it's just a beginning. Now, that doesn't mean that when you get to the end of it that you go back and look for other spiritual books that confirm what you've just read and been through as a rite of passage, let's say, through A Course in Miracles. That would be ridiculous. It's like a doctor studying to be a general practitioner who gets to the end of their study period and then goes back and starts studying the exact same thing from a different perspective, using books written by somebody else. It's like, hang on a minute. You've just graduated as a doctor. Let's be about that now. You've been through that passage of healing yourself so that you can become a healer overall. Now, there are several caveats to that. One being, and this is something people get stuck on as they go through, and I got stuck on it myself for a while. One being the idea that there's nobody out there to teach or to heal, which is fine. I mean, you use that as a point of your own integration. You use that idea as a point of your own maturation to bring you to the place of revelation readiness, right? Once you've achieved revelation readiness and had an actual bona fide spiritual experience of the idea that there is no world, something beyond the physical nature of life entirely, then you will probably find yourself back here for a moment, as I did, with the mandate perhaps to be useful to the atonement through the offering of not only the certainty of the experience that you've had, which showed you that there is no world and showed you that the Father and the Son is one, but through the offering of your own lived experience of how you came about to have that experience without drugs, without any kind of external influence at all, solely being an occurrence of the practice of the application of the principles of spiritual re-education in your own consciousness. Now that takes devotion, dedication, discipline, and all of these sorts of things, but eventually you get to a place in your own life where you do look at the nature of things around you and you do ask yourself those difficult questions. What's the point? Why am I even here? I'm just flogging my guts out every day, paying taxes and getting nowhere, and then the next thing the rug's pulled out from under my feet and everything falls apart again and again and again. If you don't know how to process all those things and how to use those things to your advantage, which in spiritual pursuit is to bring you to revelation readiness through the mastery of a sense of inner peace, then you're going to get very frustrated. But that place of frustration is going to be something that you will remember, and we call that generally your bottom line or rock bottom. You will remember that, and you will remember how frustrating it was, or how perhaps anxious you were in that place, and perhaps even wishing that you could end your life. And that will give you the discipline, it will give you the determination, it will give you everything you need to push through. But it's like Jesus says in the Bible, until you hate the world, you cannot follow me. I think he says that. It's something very similar. Unless you hate the world, you cannot be a disciple of mine, or something to that effect, which very simply is meaning exactly the same thing. You have to look at the world with open eyes and see what it is. He talks about it in the Course in Miracles as a slaughterhouse. Right? So once you embark, of course, upon that path of healing, it starts to retreat. That impression of the world as a slaughterhouse or as a place of death starts to retreat from the conscious comprehension or the conscious view, perhaps, and you start to begin to see the world as a place more akin to being a classroom, where relationships become teaching and learning tools. And you start to realize, and I've just recently heard this term trauma bonds, which is probably pretty good, I suppose, as a way of describing human relationships. But you start to realize that you never meet anybody for no reason, and you're never in a relationship with anyone for no reason. And that if you are willing, you can both come together in a decision to further or advance your efforts in the journey of your soul, by learning how to also use that relationship as a way to process the grievances and the judgments and the triggers that may eventuate in the relationship, which will, to help you both come to a place of peace further along than when you sort of joined in together. But if you forget that that's what the relationship is for, you'll probably be tempted to abandon the relationship in favor of a better one. But of course, a lesson is repeated until it's learned, and what you resist persists, and you take your mind with you everywhere you go. So all that will happen is you'll find yourself in another relationship being presented with the same opportunities to learn, and you can try to deny that again and again as much as you want, but eventually it just becomes so painful, you'll kind of like give up, you surrender. It's like, all right, I'm willing to learn this lesson here. This is a lesson in love, through being willing to forgive myself for my judgments about myself and this other person, in the idea that I'm not separate from this other person. This other person is showing me something about myself in the yin-yang of my old dualistic thought system that needs healing, that needs being brought to the light to show me that neither side, the victim nor the perpetrator or the good or the bad of it, neither side is true. If you ask a very, very small child who's just learning to talk what they think about life, they won't be able to answer you at all. But if you were to ask somebody who's been through a lot of trauma, it's a funny word, trauma, they'll probably give you all sorts of various answers about life is this and life is that and life sucks and then you die and all of that kind of thing. And I can relate to that viewpoint as a past reference that at one time I would have probably said something like that myself. I used to use a lot of drugs and alcohol to cope with the existential meaninglessness that I found of life, and until I actually realised that true meaning comes from within, and I started to look for it there. But things started to get better slowly. But you get to a point where you come to the end. Now, this process of healing, right, this passage, this bridge from one world to the other, from the old way of seeing to the new way of seeing, how long it takes you to cross that bridge depends upon how much determination and perseverance and everything you are willing to put in regarding the integrity and depth of integrity of your prayer, and your willingness to locate and confront the dark light associations of denial that you have buried away in your own conscious association with yourself. Right? Some of us have stuff that's deep down and we don't even really recognize it's there. We suspect that perhaps there's something there because we feel uncomfortable when we sit in meditation for a moment. We feel this kind of infringement upon our thought system up until the point of perhaps even terror sometimes. But that's actually a good sign if you could realize that discovering that point of terror or that point of total fear within is actually the whole process of going within. Fear being illusory, of course. There's nothing to fear other than the meaning that you've given to the unknown or the unremembered. Right? And awakening is the process of remembering. I'm remembering that I'm one with all things. I'm remembering that all of life is sacred and that I'm a whole and equal part of it, despite that I might have grandiose or verbose, I don't think verbose is the right word, grandiose or debased ideas of myself to the contrary. But eventually that bridge to the forgiven world becomes something where you begin to recognize that your feet are firmly planted on the soil of the forgiven world, and the tools needed to get you there are no longer required, or the tools needed to get you there or that you have been using to get you there are fading from your, what would you say, fading from your conscious realization of their necessity, perhaps. I hope that makes sense. And for me, I've noticed, and I always try to, making this video, I always try to make a declaration of my own sense of self regarding anything I put forward on social media or out there into the dream, because without it, I'm just commenting, mindlessly parroting anything that could be written by anybody, and that's not a part of spiritual discipline that I particularly enjoy, and it may be something that in the initial stages I see a lot of posts by people that put things up, quotes by other teachers, and I always tell people who come to me for studious reasons that they should put up their own posts, and if they're wrong or if they're off the mark a little bit, so be it, because the universe then will give them the correction. But if you're not open to the correction, if you're not willing to admit to yourself that you're wrong about something, then no correction is possible. But if you're declaring yourself, if you're declaring to this world the nature of your truth, whether you've had the revelation of it or not, then the world will hold you harshly accountable to it, and will offer you many opportunities to stand in defenselessness of the truth of the matter of your identity, because the world fundamentally represents the denial of that, and would rather boot you out or have you be crucified and try to get rid of you, rather than to acknowledge the truth and stand for a moment in the recognition that it cannot be the truth, because truth is formless and eternal and all-encompassing and has no shape, size, better or worse or any of that kind of thing. And there's another little caveat there, that when you go from the erroneous or miscreative thought system to the healed thought system, that's still that's still only in the beginning. Right? So this course is a beginning. That's still only a place that you encounter in your own internal journeying, wherein you realize that you've sort of mastered the fundamentals and are now open to universal guidance regarding whatever comes next. And I love in the Course in Miracles that little section at the back, as for the rest. I think everyone should start by reading that, as for the rest. So the end zone or the end game of A Course in Miracles then would be to have you be able to firmly plant your feet in the forgiven world. And even though the world still seems to function and revolve around you in a certain regard, you are very much in the world but not of it. And you find that you can't even really tangibly locate the triggers for things. And I find anyway that I tend to become more, what would you call it, uncompromising for the nature of offering this gift, this process of salvation to others, having had the experience that there are no others, and then coming back into time to offer it to the apparency of others in the interests of collapsing the time exponentially across the board for everyone. And there are a lot of teachers out there now who are helping to do that, having already realized their own true self and gone through the mental conundrum, and conundrum's a nice word, I would like to say mental head fuck of transformation, to hopefully pop out the other side and realize that everything that they've been through to get them to revelation readiness now no longer matters. Right? It no longer matters. The release of the inner light, the release of the Christ light is what matters. Once that has occurred, then the conscious association that's using the avatar, the form association we call the body, is on borrowed time. It's like referred to in the Course as blessed residue. And I am in command of this form association, this blessed residue, utilizing it as best I can, or as best as is given, or as best as something, if there is a best, to try and offer something of the technology of my process of awakening back into the dreaming as an anti-dream antidote, perhaps, or as an alternative to the parameters of the what is considered to be the normal time-space experience. Right? There is nothing normal about finding yourself in a place where everything dies, and I would usher you a certain sense of urgency to begin the questioning process regarding that, and start to make changes in your life regarding your own association with the world, so that you can begin to see those changes reflect back to you, and so begin to also understand the true nature of salvation, which is nothing more than seeing the true power of your mind through the effect of change in the cause and effect relationships that you have here. Eventually that transitions from an external reference perspective or from an external referencing to an internal one automatically. And of course, once you do reach the point where you release that inner light, or have your enlightenment or your awakening, or become revelation ready and given something that shows you without doubt that you are not the body, then you've done as much as you can. Right? All that there is left on earth to do is to represent that. All that there is left to do on earth is to stand as witness to the truth of the light within yourself, pardon me, and allow that expression, that frequency, because everything's a frequency, that energy, everything's energy, to permeate out into the universal flow as part of the collapse of time and space that has already been completed. And I don't want to get into that just now because that's another whole little kettle of fish, but I'm looking at something that's already over, constantly looking at the residue of what is already over seemingly appearing as here and now in my own thinking, and learning to laugh it away, or learning to forgive myself of it and not take it so seriously. It's a funny way of living, I tell you, compared to what I don't know, but it just seems to be a funny way of living. I sometimes think how preposterous the whole thing is, but I often stop to ask my question, like, who would have thought life looked like this, or not life would look like this, or what was it meant to look like? Arms and legs, hands and feet and things like that, and the consciousness and the whole thing. It's like, damn. It's pretty amazing, really. Like, it's really amazing, but illusory nonetheless. So going onward then in the journey of the soul to less dense frequency associations of experience, which you could call that, if you wanted to, interdimensional experiences, higher dimensional experiences, intergalactic, it doesn't really matter what you call it. I used to have this kind of loosely assembled thinking that perhaps when it was time for me to lay this avatar aside as a useful implement, I would experience the presence of angels, and I didn't know what angel. I didn't want to have the biblical with the wings and everything, but the presence of angels and all sorts of things. And since then, I've come to a no uncertain terms kind of conclusion, because of ongoing experiences associated with the process of transformation, that interdimensional beings are actually a thing. And I've had several meetings now, two meetings, and if you were a fan of Close Encounters, 2 meetings of the third kind and 1 of the first kind, I guess. And I don't really have much to say about that. I mean, it's all as much a mystery to me, really, as probably anyone else. But I just wanted to make this video then, I guess, as a declaration of, and it'd be interesting, I think, to go back to the very first video that I ever made and watch it and just see how things might have transcended since then. But the process for me now, not having really picked up the course for about a decade or more as a reference for my own thing, the process for me now seems very much automatic. And the idea of forgetting to laugh at the things in the dream seems to be this self-occurring, reminding happening. I don't know how to talk about it, but like the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous has a little saying, work the program until it works you. Well, it's working me, and I know it's working me, and I can feel it, sense it, pick up on it sometimes. But of course, those moments where I pick up on it are the moments that I need to apply forgiveness, because the automatic nature of Christ consciousness is something that happens without self-awareness. It just is. It's just a sense of self that is all-pervading and all-inclusive and altruistic. Altruistic's a good word to describe it. So, anyway, onward and upward. I love you. I have a feeling there's a little addendum I should add to this somewhere, but I just can't pluck it out of the ether at the moment. But there was something about in A Course in Miracles, Jesus says your awakening keeps gentle pace with you, and that is true in the most part. Sometimes it doesn't seem to be gentle. Sometimes it seems, especially in the beginning, it seems to be quite in your face, and you find yourself wondering why you ever started reading the book and all that sort of thing. But of course, you realise the nature of truth through the frequency of the symbolic representation that the words are giving you as an offering of something, and you can't really put it aside for long once you actually hear what it says. But there comes a point when, because it keeps gentle pace with you, that gentle pace, at the back of the course it says, and now there are no more lessons because you have no further need of them. That gentle pace eventually becomes a complete slowing down of the use of the text and the workbook and the lessons and everything else like that, to a point where you have no further use of them in your own recognition. And that's kind of like where I'm at with it, and have been for a while, but there's always this kind of teeter-tottering 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and sometimes you can catch a glimpse of the state of your consciousness or the state of your mind, like that. And then, of course, you drop back down into the physical compulsion to be helpful and everything, and use up what blessed residue you have, and it seems to be this on again, off again kind of thing for a while. But I guess it's coming to its final conclusion in me, the whole thing, and that the blessed residue, really there's not much left here that I would be interested to participate in, or to, that there's a lesson, the world I see holds nothing that I want. That's a true thing in me, and has been for many, many years, despite the temptations that show up to try and distract me from my declaration of that, and despite the temptations and things that seem to be in the immediate circle of sensory fulfillment and things like that, including videos and being helpful and everything else. I used to have this little analogy that transformation was a lot like being the sweeper of a pyramid, and you have the steps that goes up to the very top, and you start at the bottom and you sweep everything off and make it all nice and clean, which is your mind, and then you ascend. You have a shift in consciousness once that level, or once that particular set of steps around the pyramid is done, and you climb up and you do the next one. But of course, as you sweep the next one, you're sweeping stuff back down onto the bottom step, but you're actually sweeping less than there was originally on the bottom step, and you keep going up doing that. And then when you get to the top, of course, you have to go back down and do it again, this time adding more and more until you've got everything on the bottom layer, and then that's clean. And then you just go back up to the top. And I don't know if that's overly simplified, but the top of the pyramid, of course, is revelation. How many layers to the pyramid are there for each person? I really don't know. Really, there's only one. Salvation is not beyond immediate learning, but it seems to be a series of repetitive lessons offering the same outcome of letting go, letting go, letting go, and learning that there is no world again and again and again. And so be it. I don't know of any other way other than if you were to lock yourself in a small room perhaps, and force yourself to undergo that dark night of the soul through the experience of the deprivation of the physical nature of life to the avatar, which I probably wouldn't recommend that. If that's your thing, that's your thing. I mean, Jesus went into the desert, according to the Bible, for 30 days and 30 nights. Oh, no, it was 40 days and 40 nights with no food or water. And I know the Iceman, what's his name? I think he's some Swedish fellow that can sit on the ice and not freeze for days on end, the glaciers and all that stuff. And there are, like the Sadhus, perform incredible feats of transcendence of the body and all that sort of stuff. But even if there is the immediacy of that result through that action, the purification of the residue in the mind is still required. So enlightenment is always two parts: the experience and the purification, the transformation. Anyway, that's a bit for there, and we'll leave it at that. Peace.